Senate will come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Senators Bridges, Buckner, Coleman, Cook, Coram, Danielson,
Good morning.
Donovan, Fields, Gardner, Janal, Gonzalez, Gonzalez,
Excused.
Hanson, Henriksen, Heisey, Holbert, Jaquez Lewis, Kirkmeyer, Coker, Lee, Liston, Lundin, Moreno, Pedersen,
Here.
Priola, Rankin, Rodriguez, Scott,
Here.
Simpson, Smallwood, Sonnenberg, Story,
Here.
Winter, Woodward, Zenzinger, Zenzinger,
Excused.
Gonzalez, Mr. President,
Here. The morning roll call is 34 present, 0 absent, 1 excused. We have a quorum. Will the good senator from Pueblo please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, guests, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of the journal, Senator Simpson.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the reading of the Journal of Monday, April 11th, 2022 be dispensed with and that the journal be approved as corrected by the Secretary.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and that motion is adopted. Senate Services.
April 12, 2022, correctly printed Senate Bill 201, Senate Concurrent Resolution 2, Senate Joint Resolution 10, 11, and 12, Senate Memorial 2, correctly re-engrossed Senate Bill 164 and 170, correctly revised House Bill 1340, correctly re-revised 1093, 1098, 1202, 1276, and 1280, correctly enrolled Senate Bill 139.
Committee reports.
April 11, 2022, the Committee on Business, Labor, and Technology, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following. House Bill 1036 be postponed indefinitely. House Bill 1111 be amended as follows, and as so amended be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation. The Committee on Health and Human Services has had under consideration and has had a hearing on the following appointments and recommends that the appointments be placed on the consent calendar to confirm members of the Colorado Medical Services Board for a term expiring July 1st, 2025. William Vaden Kennard of Boulder, Colorado, to serve as an unaffiliated from the 2nd Congressional District and as a person with knowledge of medical assistance programs appointed. Committee on Health and Human Services, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following. Senate Bill 187 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations. Senate Bill 172 be amended as follows and as so amended be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation. Senate Bill 185 be amended as follows and as so amended be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation.
Will the clerk please add Senator Zenzinger to the roll? Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate proceed out of order for a moment of personal privilege by the senator from Douglas County.
The motion is for the Senate to proceed out of order for a moment of personal privilege. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Senate will proceed out of order. Senator Smallwood.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Colleagues, I'd like to introduce you this morning to some special guests we talked about yesterday. They're joining us here on the floor and in the gallery. They're representatives from the Colorado Golf Coalition who are here to promote the 2021 Colorado Golf Economic and Environmental Impact Study. Colorado has 236 golf courses, of which 179 are public. And in 2019, 6.5 million rounds of golf were played, contributing to a $1.29 billion direct economic impact while supporting just over 19,400 jobs. He's not there.
Senator Cook.
Thank you, Mr. President. Request to continue on with personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you, Mr. President. Golf courses maintain 33,000 acres of green space and supports wildlife habitats and reduce the urban heat island effect, all while using less than 1% of the state's annual water consumption. Please help me in welcoming PGA professionals, club managers, golf course superintendents, and golf association representatives to the chambers and celebrating Golf Day at the Capitol and all the positive impacts it has on the sport in our state. Please stand up. Thank you.
Special orders, second reading of bills. Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to lay over House Bill 1337 to tomorrow, Wednesday, April 13th.
Motion is to lay over House Bill 1337 until tomorrow, April 13th. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and House Bill 1337 will be laid over until tomorrow. Third reading of bills. Final passage. Will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1340?
House Bill 1340, Representatives Harrod and McCluskey, Senators Hansen and Zenzinger, concerning capital-related transfers of money.
Senator Zenzinger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move House Bill 1340 on third reading and humbly beg your forgiveness.
We'll talk about it later. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the motion is the passage of House Bill 1340. Are there any no votes? Senators Lundin, Smallwood, Woodward, Liston, Kirkmeyer. With a vote of 30 ayes, 5 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, House Bill 1340 is passed. Co-sponsors. General order, second reading of bills, consent calendar. Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve itself to committee of the whole for consideration of general order, second reading of bills, consent calendar.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The motion is adopted and the Senate will resolve itself into the committee of the whole for the consideration of the general order, second reading of bills, consent calendar, and Senator Coleman will take the chair.
The committee will come to order and the court rules relaxed for everybody in here. Will the clerk please read the title of all the bills in the general order, second reading of bills, consent calendar?
House Bill 1288, Representative Tone and Soper, Senator Smallwood and Fields, concerning increasing access to assistance for victims by providing immunity from prosecution for the offense of prostitution in specific circumstances.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move for the passage of the one bill on the second reading consent calendar, which includes House Bill 1288. There are no committee reports.
Is there any discussion on any of the bills on the consent calendar? The motion for the body is the adoption of all the bills in the general order, second reading of bills consent calendar. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bills are adopted. Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
Motion for the committee to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. The committee will rise and report.
The Senate will come to order. Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has had a bill under consideration. Will the clerk please read the report?
Mr. President, your committee of the whole begs leave to report it has had under consideration the following attached bills, being the second reading thereof, and makes the following recommendations thereon. House Bill 1288 passed on second reading and ordered revised and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage.
Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the report.
The motion is the adoption of the committee of the whole report. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, committee of the whole report is adopted. House Bill 1288 passed on second reading and order revised and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. General order, second reading of bills. Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve itself in the committee of the whole for consideration of general order, second reading of bills.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. The Senate will resolve itself into the committee of the whole for the consideration of the general order, second reading of bills, and Senator Coleman will take the chair.
The committee will come to order and the court rules relax for everybody up in here. Will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1294?
House Bill 1294, Representatives Michelson, Janae, and Young, Senators Zenzinger and Gardner, concerning additional pathways to provide special education services to children with disabilities in charter schools.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to refer House Bill 1294 to the Appropriations Committee.
The motion for the body is to refer House Bill 1294 to the Appropriations Committee. Senator Zenzinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, we have an amendment that we planned on bringing during second reading, but it drives a small appropriation. So rather than moving the amendment here, we're going to just refer the bill to appropriations first and then bring it back for second reading.
Senator Gardner.
Thank you, and I ask for an aye vote on the motion to refer.
The motion for the body is to refer House Bill 1294 to the Appropriations Committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the motion is passed, and 1294 will be sent to the Appropriations Committee. Would the clerk please read the title of 1025?
House Bill 1025, Representative Benavides, Senator Kolker, concerning the repeal of infrequently used tax expenditures and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Senator Kolker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1025 and the committee reports.
There is no committee report, but to the bill.
Members, this is a bill that's a result of our tax expenditure committee that met over the summer. Many of these taxes, the credits that we are repealing here are not being used or very infrequently used, just as the title says. It's a matter of cleaning up our tax code for things that just aren't there and being taken advantage of. So I ask for an aye vote.
Any further discussion on 1025? Seeing none, the motion is the adoption of House Bill 1025. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. 1025 is adopted. Will the clerk please read the title of House Bill 1295? Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to lay over House Bill 1295 to the end of the second reading calendar.
The motion is to lay over House Bill 1295 to the end of the second reading calendar. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and 1295 will be laid over to the end of the second reading calendar. Will the clerk please read the title of Senate Bill 146?
Senate Bill 146, Senators Zenzinger and Heisey, Representative Snyder and Catlin, concerning the expansion of the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority's Middle Income Access Program.
Senator Zenzinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Senate Bill 146 on second reading and ask for your aye vote.
And the Appropriations Committee report?
And the Appropriations Committee report.
Committee report.
We appropriated money for the program.
Is there any discussion on the Appropriations Committee report? Seeing none, the motion is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Appropriations Committee report is adopted. Any discussion on 146? Seeing none, the motion is the adoption of Senate Bill 146. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and Senate Bill 146 is adopted. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to lay over Senate Bill 176 to tomorrow, Wednesday, April 13th.
The motion is the adoption is to lay over Senate Bill 176 to tomorrow, April 13th. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and 176 will be laid over to tomorrow, April 13th. Will the clerk please? Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I request a senatorial 5.
Senatorial 5 has been requested and granted. Would the clerk please read the title of House Bill 1295?
House Bill 1295, Representatives Schroeder and Garnett, Senator Buckner and Fenberg, concerning the Department of Early Childhood and in connection therewith establishing the duties of the Department of Early Childhood and the Executive Director of the Department, relocating early childhood programs from the Department of Human Services and Education to the Department of Early Childhood, creating the Colorado Universal Preschool Program, and making and adjusting appropriations.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1295 along with the Education and Appropriations Committee reports.
To the Education Committee report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Education Committee made a lot of amendments. I'm not going to go through them all because it would take up most of our debate. Most of them, several of them were technical. There were changes that we made to the rulemaking advisory committee, how they're seated, and some other aspects around governance, and ask for an aye vote.
Motion is the adoption of the Education Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Education Committee report is adopted. To the Appropriations Committee report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Appropriations Committee obviously appropriated funding. It is a large fiscal note. A lot of that is associated with the transfer of budgets because of the consolidation of programs.
The motion is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Appropriations Committee report is adopted. To the bill, Mr. President, or Senator Buckner.
No, maybe just do it.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an exciting day. During my whole career as an educator, this has been my desire, is to have an opportunity for young people, our preschoolers, to get the education that they deserve. We know how critical early childhood is and how it dramatically shapes a child's development, education, and life experiences. However, the current early childhood system in Colorado is underfunded and fragmented, but it doesn't have to be that way. By establishing a more streamlined early childhood service through one agency, we can reduce the burdens that families and providers face in navigating these systems and provide young children with the critical early start they need to thrive. The system is fragmented, and from the parents that I've talked to, they would love the opportunity to go to one place, one shop stop, to find all of their needs for their preschoolers and navigate the system easily. With this bill, we are able to do this. Right now, our childhood programs are spread across multiple state agencies. Eligibility requirements and funding streams, both families and providers face many challenges giving children access to the high-quality early childhood experiences that they deserve. With so many different eligibility requirements, a lot of families just don't know what programs and services they can access. Unfortunately, this leaves a lot on the table that could have been used by these parents. Most Colorado families face significant barriers to accessing services that would set their families up for success. They often experience avoidable and harmful experiences that can be avoided with a family-first approach. When families have to visit multiple offices to access the programs and services, this takes time away from their family, their work, and their children are obviously delayed in their ability to be set up for success. So the new Department of Early Childhood is going to be an amazing way for families, because that's what should be first, our families and our kids, to make sure that they get the education they deserve in those preschool years. House Bill 1295 ensures families and providers have access, ease of use, and that their kids can have an integrated set of services to set them up for success. I am absolutely delighted to be a co-prime sponsor of this bill.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 1295 is a big deal, and it is nearly 600 pages. If you read through this bill, it is largely about process and about systems and about bureaucracy. But the underlying values behind it, I think, are what really are most important. This is about ensuring that we have a universal pre-K program that is accessible for every single family in the state. This is a big change. It's a big disruption. But this is what we have been talking about for several years. This is what many of us have promised to our constituents. And this is what voters actually helped us accomplish by voting at the ballot box. These 600 or so pages, give or take, are about process. They are about systems. They are about governance. But in the end, it is going to have such a profound impact on our communities, on our families, on our children, on our economies, on the providers who live and breathe this work as their mission in life. And it's important for us to be excited about this change, while at the same time recognizing two things. One, this is absolutely not the beginning. Many people came before us to work on this issue to get us to where we are. The values in this policy, the DNA of it was set in motion years ago by early childhood education leaders and advocates. Those are people that we are leaning on today to help us get this across the finish line. The second thing we need to recognize is this is also very much not the end. This is setting up a structure for how this transition will occur. This is starting to consolidate different programs, consolidate different efforts in an attempt to make it more streamlined and simpler for families, for children, and for the providers who provide these services. There's going to be a lot of work ahead of us, though. A lot of this bill is about setting out a process so that there are many voices at the table for providing advice, support, technical assistance as we do this consolidation, as we do this streamlining, and as we very soon start to deliver the important programs for families across the state. So this is not the beginning. Many have come before us to get us here. This is very much not the end. And the legislature, the providers, the executive branch, communities and families are going to be discussing the implementation of what we are doing here today, frankly, for years to come. And I think that's okay. The important thing is that we get there, and we get there as fast as possible in a way that is as good as possible for families and for providers alike. I know that there's not a single person in this chamber that doesn't value early childhood education. I think we have solved that question a long time ago. And we all know that we want to do what's best for families, best for kids. I don't question anybody's motives or their intent. I know we all want to do what is best for children and for our communities. The debate thus far over the last several weeks has been largely about how do we get there? What is the best way to get there so nobody gets left behind? What is the best way to get there so everybody's voice is valued and is at the table? And at times we've disagreed on those questions, and I think that's also okay. I think because of those disagreements, because of those discussions, we have a better bill in front of us. And we are going to be offering a couple of amendments right here from the start because of those conversations. I want to thank the Education Committee. I want to thank everybody that has been part of this discussion up until now. I do feel like it has been a good faith effort to find a collaborative approach to solving this issue, and in the end, having us all come together to do what is best for kids and best for families. This is a big day for Colorado if we can get this across the finish line, and I'm confident that we are going to. And I want to thank all the conversations that went into this that are shaping the amendments that will be offered today, that have shaped this bill and will shape the way we deliver early childhood education for so many families and kids across this state.
Senator Buckner.
Mr. Chair, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention someone who has been there with me from the beginning because I have a passion for early childhood, and her name is Anna Jo Haynes. As much credit as I can give her, I want to, because this lady is known across the country for her expertise in early childhood. And it's because of her that this passion and this fire that is lit under me is going to stay there, because it's all about the kids, it's all about the families, and that's why we are here today, to make sure that our kids get the best education possible. So thanks, Anna Johannes, for giving me the strength and the insight and the passion to continue on this road to see the Department of Early Childhood come into fruition. And now we have some amendments we would like to present. I would like to present L028. I'm sorry, I said the wrong one. L079 amendment. This is a technical correction, including curing conflicts with House Bill 22-1038 and House Bill 22-1270.
There's an amendment at the desk. Would the clerk please read amendment number 79?
Amendment L079,
Senator Buckner.
I got excited. I move L079.
To the amendment. Please tell us about it one more time.
Yes, this is a technical correction, including curing conflicts with House Bill 22-138 and House Bill 22-1270.
Any further discussion on amendment 79? Seeing none, the motion is the adoption of amendment 79. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and amendment 79 is adopted. Senator Buckner.
Thank you. I move L082.
Before we move it, let's get it, and I will ask you to move it, and you're doing an amazing job.
Can you tell I'm excited?
Yes. There's an amendment at the desk. Would the clerk please read amendment 82?
L082, Senator Buckner, amend re-engrossed bill, page 439, after line 21, insert section 28 in Colorado Revised Statutes 1345-101, amend 2D as follows.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move L082.
Proper motion to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is another technical amendment. It's a conforming amendment that we discovered we had to run after committee, and it's amendments to CCAP to clarify references throughout statute regarding public assistance programs.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion is the adoption of amendment 82. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, amendment 82 is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. Would the clerk please read amendment number 83?
Amendment L083, Senator Buckner, amend re-engrossed bill, line page 165 after 23, insert public
Senator
assistance
Buckner.
I move L083.
To the amendment.
This is a conforming amendment to ensure the Department of Early Childhood has the same authority to implement CCAP as DHS currently has.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion is the adoption of amendment 83. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, amendment 83 is adopted. To the bill or an amendment? Mr. President. There's an amendment at the desk. Would the clerk please read amendment 97?
Amendment L097.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move L097.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, this one is not technical. This one's not conforming. This is a big one. And I want to thank the senator from Weld County for the discussions we've had in committee and this morning. This is an amendment that I think really tries to strike the right balance when it comes to this big governance question. So the governance question is, if you're trying to do something big, trying to do something innovative, and you're trying to do something that in some ways in the economic sense of it is disruptive, how do you proceed? You generally probably don't want to proceed with a bulky bureaucratic board largely made up of folks who maybe would be okay with things staying the way they are. And so there's been this ongoing debate. Do you have efficiency? Do you have innovation? Or do you have a process that everybody has full confidence that they have a vote, like an actual vote at the table? And I think this strikes the right balance. It allows for the Rules Advisory Committee to largely be the entity that is providing input and helping shape how this program is getting off the ground. But then after 2 years, there would be a sunset process. We are very familiar with that process. At times it is about things that maybe don't seem like we really need to be debating and discussing. They are sometimes about arcane and very specific technical parts of our statute. This will be a sunset process that is incredibly deliberate, that is timely, and we'll be asking a very fundamental question about this program. So instead of answering that question now, when we don't know exactly how this is going to roll out, we don't know who may come up with issues and things that maybe didn't come up during this debate, after a couple of years of delivering this program and learning what works, what needs to be tweaked, whose voices were too loud, whose didn't get enough attention, we will do a sunset of the rulemaking authority of the executive director. And it will ask a fundamental question. Should we continue the rulemaking authority of that executive director? Or should we transition to a tier 1 board, to have a governing board, to take the reins from that point forward to govern this important program? Or should it be something else, maybe a hybrid of some sort? That is a question that I think is best answered after an evaluation, after a sunset process where we have an independent body look at how it's been going. How has it been delivering for kids? What changes do we need to make? What's the best path forward for the long term? And that's what this amendment does. It sunsets that rulemaking authority and forces the legislature to act based on a sunset review, based on an evaluation period, and at that point we can have that discussion as a legislative body about the long-term governance for this incredibly important program. So urge and I vote. I think this strikes a good balance. It does not make everybody incredibly happy, and it doesn't give everybody what they want. I think that would be impossible. But I do think it strikes the right balance and puts this big fundamental question at the right time in front of the right people with the right amount of data and information to make that informed decision.
Senator Zinzinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to first thank the sponsors for offering this amendment. I think I'm probably in the camp that was pushing for something like this. I also probably feel as if maybe 2 years might be too long, but I recognize the difficulty in sort of this interim period while we are making decisions about how we're going to stand the department up. And I'm glad that we are moving toward this discussion sooner than the amendment that we adopted in committee, which was 3 years. I truly felt as if pushing off that decision until 3 years was not appropriate because we are so focused on the end point about what this department is going to look like in the end that we have forgotten the good work that's going to need to take place during the interim while we're standing this department up, while we are working on implementing systems. I think that I'm grateful to the sponsors for offering this compromise because I believe that there is great value in moving to a co-governance model where the practitioners, the people who are on the ground that are making these things happen, are contributing to the decision-making around these things. And so we had a really multi-hour conversation about it in the Education Committee because while it's true, it seems like we're digging into the weeds and that we all, from a high level, support the concept. That's literally our jobs at this moment as legislators, is to dig into into the weeds. And so I appreciate this amendment. Again, I don't think it goes quite far enough, and so I'm going to be offering a series of subsequent amendments that I think are good companions to this one in order to continue to increase that decision making and governing in the interim, not necessarily to get at what we become in the end, but to make sure that we are doing a good job of standing up the department in between. So I would urge and I vote for this amendment. Thank you.
Senator Lundin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I rise in support of this amendment as well, and would associate myself with many of the comments you've just heard. This bill is 522 pages as re-engrossed. Wouldn't you love to hear my sonorous baritone read that bill to you today? I do not intend to do that. But it is a ponderous bill. It is an enormous bill. It is a bill that does an array of things inside state government, local government, school districts, county governments, and creates new functions of government called local coordinating organizations. It does so many, many things, and I will come back to this microphone and talk about the most important, in my opinion, elements of this bill, and that is the students and the parents that this bill seeks to serve. We'll talk about that more later. We're kind of in the process piece of this discussion right now. This amendment simply says it's so big, we're pretty sure we're not going to get it right, and we need to come back and reevaluate in a couple of years. I think that is just good common sense to say the rulemaking authority, which is the primary governmental mechanism for control, should be reevaluated at 2 years. And this potentially imperious executive director, an individual with great authority, we will look at whether it's appropriate for one individual to have all this control over all the rulemaking with an advisory board. And you all have been on an advisory board or have served in circumstances where there's an associated advisory board. Advisory boards talk, but tragically, frequently, advisory boards talk can frequently be cheap. It's not taken as seriously as it potentially should be. And that's the question. Should there be greater authority from more voices, more perspectives brought into the rulemaking and therefore the control over what is happening in this brand new Department of State Government that is being created? So I support this. We'll have, as the prior speaker said, some additional amendments that are also policy constructing in nature that I would like to bring into the conversation and see if we can't tweak and tune and improve what we have going. But I did want to rise in support and say thank you. I appreciate the sponsors' acknowledgement of the need to maybe tap the brakes or be prepared to tap the brakes and reevaluate as a little bit of time passes down the pathway. So thank you to the bill sponsors for this amendment, Amendment 97. I rise in support of that and look forward to chatting with you more about additional policy aspects of this bill. And then I really want to spend some time talking about what does this mean to the students and the parents whom this gigantic new Department of Government will seek to serve. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Krugmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too rise in support of this amendment, 97. I would agree with the comments that have been made previously that I don't believe that it goes far enough, but it's the best we're going to get today. And so, not wanting to look a gift horse in the mouth, I would urge everyone to support this amendment. But I do think, hopefully within, as we go through this next 2-year period, that there is the opportunity to really examine and really have some good conversation, in-depth conversation with the folks who are going to be with the entities that have to implement this bill and have their comments at the table. It's more than, a lot of times counties, everybody thinks they're just a stakeholder in the process. Actually, counties are a partner in this process. They're required to implement the program. which is why it's difficult for me to understand why we aren't having them at the table when we're trying to come up with rules. We have the State Board of Human Services. A lot of these programs that are being transferred over to the Office of Early Childhood are coming out of the Department of Human Services, where there is a governing body, there is a governing board, where you have all points of view come to the table, where you have ample discussion about the rules, where you have everyone who is being impacted by this. Every agency, every entity has the opportunity to have a voice in the decision-making process. We don't have that with this department. We have a single person who will be in charge, and we were referring to them as a czar, would be in charge of this department, in charge of the rulemaking authority. I think personally it's a bit disingenuous when you talk about that they will follow the Administrative Procedures Act, which has public hearing process, which has, again, rulemaking authority, but really is more of a transparent process that brings in and has people have the opportunity to talk to a governing board, to work with that governing board in the whole development of the rules and the regulations that will be governing these programs that are within this department. But for today, again, it's the best we're going to get, so I would urge everyone to support the amendment, and I would just like to thank as well the sponsors of this bill, the good senator from Boulder. Man, that kind of is hard to say. I just want you to say. I just want you to know. And the good senator from, I was used to saying president. So.
Right, that's the issue.
And the good senator from Aurora for willing to come to the table with a compromise. Thank you.
Senator Priola.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I rise in support of L097, but this debate here today, as well as the debate we heard for many hours in Senate Education, has kind of perplexed me in that we're basically arguing between the state implementing this new department or arms of the state implementing the new department and the interrelation between them and the conversations between them. Nevertheless, I just wanted to kind of give that perspective on what we've spent so many hours arguing about. I ask for an aye vote on Amendment 97.
The motion is the adoption of Amendment 97. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Amendment 97 is adopted. There's an amendment of the desk. Will the clerk please read Amendment number 96?
Amendment L096 by Senator.
Senator Zinzinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Amendment L096.
To the amendment.
Members, as part of our discussions during the Education Committee, a couple of points were brought up that I felt were really important that we dig into a little bit more and address. And so what Amendment 96 does is it identifies a number of places in the bill where the department, in my opinion, can better align and coordinate with county human services. So again, this came out of discussions that we had with county human service leaders and commissioners that are in the process, as you heard, of being a partner in ensuring that the efforts of the early childhood department are integrated with other human services efforts. And we had a lot of discussion about which of those functions were staying with the department, which of those functions were migrating over to the new department, and why. Some of the migrations made perfect sense. Some of them we brought up questions. We just kind of asked a little bit more about, well, why did we decide to move that one and not this one? And so what this amendment does is it speaks to some of those questions that we asked. And if there by chance was a migration away from the department into the new department, I wanted to make sure that we were not creating silos, new silos. And so what this amendment does is it's going to track some things along the lines of access to food, cash assistance, things around health. And so very very specifically on page 1, lines 1 through 8, the amendment really gets at some of the department principles that are outlined on page 22, where we are intentionally calling out coordination between human service efforts and the new department with regard to food access, cash assistance, and healthcare. Then on page 1, lines 9 through 13, we are ensuring that the independent evaluation that is discussed on page 30 actually takes a look and examines to the extent to which the department's efforts are coordinated with other supports and services for families that are not operated by the department, which include things like food assistance, cash assistance, and healthcare. Then on line 1, lines 14 through 16, it clarifies on page 39 of the bill that there are some family strengthening programs that you really can't apply for. And so, for instance, some programs are only open to child welfare involved families. And so we want to make sure that the language is clear, that we are not opening up these programs to all members, to everyone, to all of the family strengthening programs, to all families, when there isn't, or if there isn't, a relevant connection to that application process. And then on page 1, line 17 through 28, we are reinforcing that in the application to be a local coordinating organization referred to as an LCO, on page 41, that the LCO will identify and engage the support of the county and identify how it will work with the local human services agencies to support access to county provided services, and how the entity will support county child welfare services, in particular implementing the Families First Prevention Services Act. That was one of the questions that came up in committee, which was around, we are in the process of implementing Families First. And if we are in the process of implementing Families First, that has not yet happened. We are in transition. And in transition, we're going to transition some of these functions to a new department. So this amendment is just putting on paper and making sure with a lot of specificity that we don't lose track of that good work, that we are not forgetting the work of implementing the Families First Prevention Services Act. And then lastly, on page 1, line 30, and page 2, line 6, what we are doing is that we're ensuring that the local coordinating organization community plan that is outlined on pages 43 and 45 of the bill, that LCO will work in coordination with the local departments of human services and the community-based organizations so that we are integrating the outreach for early childhood programs and family support programs, because it goes beyond just preschool. We want to make sure that all of the other functions that are also going to be happening within the department are connecting back to our coordinating and partnering agencies like the Department of Human Services, so that we are not creating new silos, and we're just putting some more specificity on that agreement. So with that, I ask for an aye vote.
Motion is the adoption of Amendment 96. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. 96 is adopted. There's a member at the desk. Will the clerk please read amendment number 91?
Amendment L091, Senator Zenzinger.
Senator Zenzinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Amendment L91.
To the amendment.
So what this amendment does is it really seeks to clarify and elevate the nominating process and the selection process for the Rules Advisory Committee and the RAC, the RAC membership. So one of the requests that we have been discussing around the governance structure was just ensuring that while we are standing up the department, not at the end, but in the process of standing up the governance structure, that we are ensuring multiple perspectives are at the table. it's really important during that rulemaking process that, that multiple perspectives are represented so that we can truly have their guidance and feedback on the Rules Advisory Council. I had attempted to offer this amendment in the Education Committee, but the county stakeholders had not had an opportunity to review it and provide their input. So we held off voting on that amendment. And in fact, they did have some additional guidance. So we amended my amendment so that it changes the selection process for potential members of this Rules Advisory Council. And in fact, we are adding a position to it, a role for the Early Childhood Leadership Commission. Much of this bill came out of the good work and discussions that occurred at the Early Childhood Leadership Commission level. So it just makes sense that we want to continue that dialogue, that we want to continue to have their input on the Rules Advisory Committee. Not only that, but that Leadership Commission itself actually represents a very diverse set of perspectives that I think are worthwhile. And it will also include voices from County Human Services, voices from K-12, voices from parents, businesses, and providers. And then, in addition, what this amendment will do is it will solicit interest from individuals and nominations from parents, counties, county departments of human services, providers, and school districts to develop potential members of the Rules Advisory Council as selected by the ED. And then in regard to the Rules Advisory Committee, the RAC membership, it clarifies that we need to have someone from an in-home child care provider perspective. And so this will add that as well. And then it will also add that county departments of human services that have both rural and non-rural perspectives also be included, and that those members from the county will have specialized knowledge of CCAP, of child protection, and of various fiscal matters that are affecting the counties. And that's what that amendment does, and I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion is the adoption of Amendment 91. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, 91 is adopted. As a member of the desk, would the clerk please read Amendment number 93?
Amendment L093 by Senator Zenzinger, amend Green-Gross Bill, page 13, after line 8, insert G, in reviewing and making recommendations concern rules and in preparation other recommendations for the executive director. The council shall strive to develop recommendations that are detailed in measure and consider the impacts on children, parents, families, providers, school districts, counties, and local coordinating organizations. The council must approve recommendations by a majority vote and provide those recommendations to the executive director in writing. Members of the council voting in the minority may submit a written explanation of their
Senator Zenzinger.
Thank you, members. I apologize for the lengthy description. We were just trying to figure out. I thought I was missing an amendment, but we are good. So I move Amendment L93.
To the amendment.
So my prior amendment, L91, really talked about the nomination process to that Rules Advisory Council. And what this does is this amendment sort of sets out some guidelines for that Rules Advisory Council. So it basically charges them to develop a detailed recommendation, and it moves that council to work by a majority vote so that we have more consensus-based decision-making that is happening. So
Get a withdrawal. Did we already do 95?
I did it first.
Then yeah, I think so. You have to withdraw. I think this is already.
No, I did 96. Can I please have a senatorial 5? I think we've had some confusion about which amendments do what, so I would request a senatorial 5 just so that we can figure it out.
Senatorial 5 has been requested and granted. Senator Zinzinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I love it when I'm right. So, we are currently debating Amendment L93, and I meant to debate Amendment L93, so I'm going to continue debating and offering Amendment 93. So, as I said,
Zinzinger,
the previous amendment...
Senator Zinzinger, 1 second, please. We need to call Senatorial 5. Senator Zinzinger.
So, Amendment 93 develops rules for the Advisory Council, the Rules Advisory Council, often referred to as the RAC, and it charges them to develop detailed recommendations and to work essentially by a consensus-based model. And the reason why that is important is that a consensus-based model forges better dialogue, it forges better partnership, and it outlines much more detailed and measurable goals and impacts of those decisions. And so because of that, this amendment will elevate that consensus-based approach. And then secondly, it actually requires that the executive director will solicit feedback from that Rules Advisory Council and consider their recommendations of the council prior to promulgating a rule. And this is really important. What's the point of having the RAC? What's the point of having these recommendations if the ED can just do whatever they want? So we want to make sure that this committee is treated as a partner, that they are co-governing, and that before the ED turns around and makes a decision, the ED is going to consult. It requires that the ED consult with the RAC on those decisions before moving forward. It doesn't require compliance. It doesn't force anybody into anything. But if we are acting from a place of consensus building, and if we are opening up those lines of communication, I feel as if ultimately the decision that happens will have been well vetted. And I think it gives an opportunity for all of the voices that are on that committee to have the opportunity to have their say, and it will make for a better rule, it'll make for a better decision in the end. So with that, I ask for an aye vote on Amendment L093.
The motion is the adoption of Amendment L09. Senator Lundin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to my colleague, I'd like to dialogue a little bit about a potential additional amendment that is very much like Amendment L093. It's an amendment that speaks to some of the same principles, doesn't require a majority vote, does not necessarily get the minority report, both of which are elements of the Amendment 9.3 that we're talking about that I think are beneficial. The amendment I was contemplating, 87, which has not been offered, but I'll just talk conceptually because it's very similar to 93, says the council shall act by consensus in advising and making recommendations to the executive director. What we're trying to get here is a consensus among that council. Doesn't have to be a majority, doesn't have to be a supermajority, although a supermajority would certainly indicate the likelihood of consensus. It indicates everyone getting to the point of being able to say, I can live with that. I wouldn't veto that. I would accept that as a rule that I believe is beneficial. If the council is unable to reach consensus on an issue or a rule, the council shall provide the executive director an explanation in writing, similar to the minority report that is referred to in your amendment, for why the council was unable to come to that consensus. So trying to get at the same thing, maybe what I'm doing here is establishing a legislative record of how important we think consensus is from this group that is advising in this 2-year interim before we get to sunset and the ability to reestablish what may be a different rulemaking set of criteria. But I wanted to ask my colleague about her thoughts, whether this would add beneficially to what she's trying to do, whether she thinks there's distinctions that are different. And I guess I'd ask the bill sponsor as well about some of these same elements. Consensus being a key component of what we're trying to get to, a key principle with regard to the rules being drawn.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the senator from El Paso County for this discussion. I think it's an important one. I think, generally speaking, it is a thing to strive for, is trying to reach consensus in a body like this. However, I think in practicality, I have some issues with it. One is if it's required that they reach consensus, and if they don't reach consensus, then they are not allowed to make a recommendation. In some ways, it kind of takes away the voice of that Rules Advisory Committee, because it means there are times where they're like, we couldn't reach consensus, so we're just not going to weigh in on this topic, even though we are here to weigh in and provide input. And so I think it potentially works against the power and the voice of the Rules Advisory Committee is what I would say. The second thing is, generally, yes, we should all strive for consensus in a committee like this. However, it gives every single seat essentially veto authority. And I think that's problematic. I think you should always strive for consensus, but at the end of the day, there's a majority vote that can carry, and the minority can have a minority report, and that can be part of the record, et cetera. But to require consensus, I think either means they just don't make recommendations in certain topics, and I think that's not great. And secondly, I think it empowers each individual member to have a veto pen for their recommendations, and I don't think that's constructive or really the intent behind having a Rules Advisory Committee in the first place.
Senator Zinzinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the senator from El Paso's comments regarding 93. I would say that my amendment here probably does not speak to the consensus concept as strongly as his potential amendment, but I do want to point out two elements of my amendment that are in parallel. And on line 10, we are asking that members of the council voting in the minority may submit a written explanation of their opposition to the recommendations to the executive director. So I do call that out, and that is integral to this amendment. And then secondly, something that I think is stronger than the amendment that is being offered by, potential amendment that would be offered by my colleague from El Paso, is this notion that before making that decision, the executive director does have to consult, does have to solicit feedback from and consider the recommendations of the council. That's always been the assumption. We all assume that that is what a good executive director would do. We would hope that that is what a good executive director would do, but I would rather not rest everything on hopes and dreams. I would rather put it in writing, and that's what this amendment does, is it It demands, it clarifies that yes, while that may be good practice, it actually says you gotta do it. Before, and this starts on page 13, line 9, we are going to be inserting the words right before the word if. We're going to be saying, before promulgating a rule, the executive director shall solicit feedback from and consider the recommendations of the council. So just to sum up, I think that with regard to consensus-based decision-making, this amendment is probably not as strong as my colleague from El Paso would like. However, it is in the same vein. It does call out a minority report, and it does go stronger than my colleague by insisting on paper in writing that the executive director shall consult with the RAC. And with that, I would please ask for an aye vote for Amendment 93.
Senator Lunding.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I will confine my comments now to Amendment 93, anticipating that I will bring, in an effort to achieve consensus with this body, I will bring in the debate as we proceed Amendment 87. 93, the amendment before us, does in fact move in the direction that I would like to have us move. It requires quite frankly, some meaningful input that is acknowledged by the executive director in a meaningful way, a majority vote and a minority report. What I'm striving to do here, what I'm seeking to do here, is to protect the voice of the minority. And this is so critically important in this particular project that we're having. Right now, across Colorado today, we have a patchwork, a unique set of what's called mixed delivery, a mixed delivery model. All sorts of different people over the years have said, you know what, I care about kids, children, those who are just toddlers, just beyond infancy. They're just beginning to learn and walk and engage with their peers and in some meaningful ways with society. I love those very impressionable children, and I want to care for them. And I'm going to stand up a preschool or a child care facility or something to do that most important work of shaping the young individuals who will be tomorrow's society. And so in that space, there is an incredible diversity of perspectives and programs and processes and people, all with slightly different versions of how this should be done. Because in this early moment of that child's life, the child is very much like their parents and very much like the worldview that their parents would have. And as they become more mature over time, their parents will release them, saying, you've grown to maturity now. You can go toe-to-toe with society, the benefits and challenges that are inherent in society. You have grown up to the point I trust you to make good judgments. That's in the teen years, the later teen years. Right now, these children are very, very impressionable. They don't know anything. They trust everything. You all know what it's like interacting with an infant. They all trust. Toddlers trust everything before them. And so it's so critically important. So what I'm talking about here is protecting the diversity of voices and perspectives that are providing service. And so this advisory board, as the rules are created, is an important inflection point, an important leverage point in that conversation around how we protect that diversity of perspectives and diversity of ideas. So 93 moves in that direction. It gives us the ability of this department and the executive director of the department to receive a minority report, an outlying voice that says, hold it, time out, time out. For years and years and years, we did it this way, and there was no problem. And now you're pulling me away from that. You're pulling us away from that. We want to have our perspective be heard. We want our perspective to have a degree of authority. We want our perspective to be meaningful. And I would argue, as a senator standing before my colleagues, that is critically important, that we allow and protect for that minority perspective. And so this amendment 93 moves us in that direction. I don't know if it moves us far enough, but at least there would be a record, a minority report saying, Not so fast. I'm not sure that's the best way to do this, and we would have that in the record. I would rather, quite frankly, that it be more than just a piece of the record. I would prefer that it be something that is being acted upon in the moment, that consensus among this advisory group would be achieved, and therefore the consensus perspective move forward. So I support 93 as a step in the right direction. I'm one of those who frequently says, let's not let great be the enemy of the good, but when it comes to protecting those precious children, 3 and 4 and 5 years old, boy, I think we need to do everything we can to strive to get to as close to perfection as possible. And my perspective is consensus among this board would be much closer to the perfection we need to seek in protecting those 3 and 4 and 5-year-old children. I support Amendment 93, and I call out to my colleagues, I don't think it gets us where we need to go. It does not go far enough. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too rise in support of Amendment L093, but would also, I know we're going to have another amendment coming up, but would also say that it's just not going far enough, but it is a step in the right direction. I just want to point out, first of all, that this council is a volunteer council. They do act as a state body for purposes of open meetings law. However, they do not receive reimbursement. Either the council or subcommittee don't receive reimbursement for expenses or per diem for compensation. So essentially, they are voluntary. Great. We're going to involve as many people as possible. I would just point to the amendment where it talks about that the council must approve recommendations by a majority vote. Great. And provide those recommendations to the executive director in writing. The key word there is the council. So essentially what will happen here to provide the recommendations to the executive director in writing is that staff will prepare those recommendations and get them to the executive director and put those in writing. The next sentence says members. So a member of the council voting in the minority may submit a written explanation of their opposition to the recommendations. This is why I believe it doesn't go far enough, because now we're going to have to rely on a volunteer taking the time to explain their opposition to a recommendation to the executive director, and they will have to do the writing, they will have to do the preparation. It won't be staff doing it for them. So again, this amendment is a step in the right direction. I just don't believe that it goes far enough, but at least we're starting to get there.
Motion is the adoption of Amendment 93. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. 93 is adopted. There's a member of the desk. Will the clerk please read Amendment number 95?
Amendment L095 by Senator Zenzinger. Amendment.
Senator Zenzinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is
Please move the amendment.
I move Amendment L095.
To the amendment.
This is the amendment that was sort of causing some of the confusion because I had a prior version, an amendment L92 that I thought I was offering, and it turns out I am not. But what amendment L95 does is it speaks to the subcommittee of the Rules Advisory Council and some of the cross-agency alignment that I am seeking for the family strengthening programs and for the child maltreatment and child welfare programs. So this amendment comes out of a discussion that we had in the Education Committee. I was slightly surprised and a little curious when, as I was paging through the 600-page bill, that I discovered that some of the child maltreatment and child welfare programs were moving. And I just wanted to clarify again that we are not building up new silos. So in the existing bill right now, there is the ability for the Rules Advisory Council, which we just amended. We just amended how people get nominated to that. We amended the makeup of those committees. We amended their processing and how they're going to go about making decisions on that committee. But in addition, another authority that is already in the bill is that there is an issue of subcommittees that can be appointed by the Rules Advisory Council to dig in to various issues that might need a panel of experts in. So for example, I served on the Affordable Housing Transformational Task Force, and we put together a sub-panel of housing experts that were able to dig in a little bit more deeply into some of the issues that we were talking about to make recommendations for the larger committee to discuss. And so what this amendment does is it gets at those subcommittees of the Rules Advisory Council and just making sure that some of those issue committees will address the questions that were brought up in the Education Committee around child welfare, child mistreatment, maltreatment, and some of the family strengthening programs that are moving away from the Department of Human Services and into the Department of Early Childhood. Because they are moving, but yet the maltreatment programs are essentially still staying with the Department of Human Services, we want to make sure that these two efforts are working in coordination with one another, in conjunction with one another, in partnership with one another, because we don't want to create silos, particularly when it comes to things of child maltreatment and around strengthening our families. So this amendment puts a little bit of meat on the bones, and it says that we are going to promote a seamless coordination between the Office of Children, Youth, and Families at CDHS and the Department of Early Childhood in administering those family strengthening programs. It utilizes an existing structure, and it has all of the key partners who are already at the table, but it does expand the scope a little bit to ensure that we have an effective alignment, and it works on essentially making sure that those good programs that are aimed at strengthening our families continues to succeed in the new department. And so I ask for an aye vote on Amendment 95.
Motion is the adoption of Amendment 95. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. 95 is adopted. To the bill. Seeing no further discussion, the motion is the pass. Yeah, we're going to get it done.
Get off of Instagram.
Instagram. Senator Lundeen. There's an amendment at the desk.
I told Barb to get off Instagram.
Will the clerk please read amendment number 87?
Amendment L087 is by Senator Lundeen. Amendment re-engross bill, page 13 after line 8. Insert G. The council shall act by consensus in advancing and
Mr.
making...
President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move L087 and ask for a no vote.
Motion is the... I'm just playing. Senator Lundeen.
Thank you very much. So what Amendment L087 does, and I won't reread it because we've read it previously, it takes us back to this concept of protecting the minority voice by requiring that the council come to consensus. Y'all have been in a difficult circumstance. We've all been in difficult circumstances where you're working with a group of people, either fellow employees trying to figure out what you're going to do to move the best interest forward for the company, fellow board members, where you're going to move the best interest for the organization on the board that you sit, where you need to convince everybody. We've got to move in this way, and we cannot leave anyone behind. We must not leave anyone behind because every perspective is worth listening to. This amendment simply says you've got to get to consensus. Can you live with that? I know it's not comfortable. I know it's not the ideal of what you want, but can you live with that when everybody gets to the point where they say, you're right, I disagree with that perspective, but I can live with that. I think that we need to honor that perspective as well. That is the moment of consensus. This amendment simply says the rules that will govern and direct, as provided by this board that's kind of created sits off to the side and may or may not have dramatic influence over the executive director, but we hope it will. It gives that board a North Star. We must get to consensus. We cannot leave anyone or their perspective behind as we create the operating framework of this made from whole cloth new Department of State Government that affects all of the children who would participate in early childhood education in the state. This is critically important, what will be done in those children's lives, and I argue it's critically important that we make sure all perspectives, a diversity of thoughts and ideas are honored in that process. I urge your support of Amendment 8.7.
Senator Zinzinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And members, I am going to encourage a no vote, even though I do understand the intent. And I'm going to speak to the example that I gave when I was talking about my amendment about the Affordable Housing Task Force. So that subcommittee, that subpanel, they actually adopted a consensus-based decision-making model. What they did, however, though, is they determined a floor, so or a threshold. And so they said, you know what, you got to get at least 75% of this group on board in order for a recommendation to move forward. That floor, it basically had the same effect without requiring 100%. Because it turns out that there were a series of recommendations that were put forward where literally only one person disagreed. So they had 99% agreement, and they literally had one person who said, yeah, I'm not on board with the exact language. He consented that he agreed in concept, that he was supportive in concept, but he quibbled with some of the precise language. Nevertheless, that recommendation was 99% agreed to, and it was put forward to the full task force, and the task force agreed 100% to adopt it. So the benefit of that consensus-based decision-making of that Rules Advisory Committee will still happen. We will still get the benefit of that, but it does prevent what is essentially a veto vote with not allowing the decisions to move forward. And so I believe that well-intentioned, this amendment will not actually benefit the full voices of that advisory council, which we just worked so hard to beef up. So I will have to ask for a no vote.
Senator Lundeen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I want to be clear. I am not demanding unanimity. I'm essentially saying supermajority with attention to the perspective of the minority. That's what I believe Amendment 87 brings. Consensus is not unanimous. Consensus is I can live with that.
Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in support of L087. And again, this has a portion of it that speaks to that the council shall provide to the executive director an explanation in writing for why the council was unable to come to consensus. I think that's probably more fair so that the minority voice can be heard, so that all members of the council can be heard. What we previously adopted was that the council must approve recommendations by a majority vote and then provide those recommendations in writing to the executive director, the council. So again, that would be in writing. The staff would assist with that. What was previously approved was members of the council voting in the minority may submit a written explanation of their opposition. So it would be incumbent upon that individual member to actually write up the explanation of their opposition and get it submitted instead of having staff assist with that. The reason I'm supportive of this is because of the letter that was dated September 9th from the Colorado Counties and the Colorado Human Services Directors Association, who sat on the Transition Advisory Group. And in their letter to the Transition Working Group, this is what they wrote. We have concerns about the commitment of the iterative process outlined in House Bill 21-1304, a lack of clarity, so they have concerns around a lack of clarity around decision-making and a general dismissal of opposing viewpoints during the Transition Advisory Group meetings. This is a prime example. The prime example of the breakdown in this process is the decision to move the entire Office of Early Childhood, which was presented at the Transition Advisory Group on August 25th. There was no explanation about how this recommendation was derived, and confusion among the Transition Advisory Group members about what programs were even included. So again, ask for an aye vote on L087 so that the entire council, all of the members, know that their voice will be heard and it will be done in writing to the executive director.
The motion is the adoption of 87. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The noes have it, 87 is lost. There is a senatorial file has been requested and granted. There's an amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read amendment number 87?
5.
Oh, we just did it. Did we do 87? 85.
Amendment L085 by Senator Lundin, amend the Education Committee report dated March 31st, 2022, page 2, line 11, strike that A, substitute that A, page 2, line 14.
Senator Lundin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move amendment L085.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the course of the committee hearing, it became clear that we've got multiple government entities acting and activated in the process of delivering services and so forth. And we've got this new entity called a local coordinating organization. There may be within one county multiple local coordinating organizations. There may be within one county multiple school districts. And we provided relief to the school districts so that they would not have to, in the committee chose to do this, bill sponsors supported it, they gave the school districts the ability to say we only are required to participate with one LCO or local coordinating organization. This amendment, Amendment 85, would do the same thing for counties. It says simply that a county is not included in more than one community as organized by a local community organization, without the prior approval of the county Board of Commissioners expressed in an approved board resolution. So you have to have formal action from the county saying we are willing to be in more than one local coordinating organization community, but the county has to say, yes, that makes sense. It would be onerous, I think, burdensome for a county to be required to participate in 2 or 3 or 5 or 7 different LCOs within their county. This amendment simply says, let's be administratively coherent in this. Let's make sure that, in fact, we're only requiring counties to participate in one unless they choose to participate in several. I urge your support of Amendment L085, and I think we might have sponsor support.
Senator Buckner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Lundin, from Monument, for always being willing to work with us. But we believe that this amendment would lead to more school district LCOs because they're the ones that can deal with procurement. We don't think this is workable, and school districts are totally different. So as much as I understand your feelings about this, I cannot vote yes on this amendment.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would urge a no vote on this. I think there are some questions. I get what it is trying to achieve. It's similar to what we achieved through an amendment in committee. However, if this is applying to LCOs for offering preschool, it may be at times physically impossible to accommodate this amendment and the amendment that was adopted in committee. And that's because if you have to get approval from a county and a school district before you do anything that cuts across county lines or school district boundaries, you may not be able to achieve that approval from both, and there would be a conflict, and then nobody would know how to move forward. And so I think it could be a problem. I think everyone is going to strive towards consensus, if you will, on figuring out the catchment areas. But I do think putting this in stone, saying that the county and a school district both have to sign off if you're going to go across boundaries, I think you actually could have a situation where you just don't know how to proceed because you can't achieve that. So I would urge a no vote.
Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would urge an aye vote of L085. And yes, we did do this in committee for the school districts, and basically what it says is that a county is not included in more than one community without the prior approval of the County Board of Commissioners, as expressed by resolution. So members, this has to do with the local coordinating organization. We talked about this at great length, not only in committee, but we've talked about it in the interim committee of early childhood school readiness committee. But when we talked about it in committee, I think the reality started coming to fruition. And I'm just going to give you an example of one county that has 16 school districts, has an early childhood council. It's the county, numerous nonprofits, numerous other folks that could be local coordinating organizations, and they could find themselves in more than one, certainly more than 10 local coordinating organizations. What if the school district decides that they are going to be the local coordinating organization? This county would end up being part of 16 local coordinating organizations. And how are they going to provide the services through CCAP or other services that are provided through the County Department of Human Services in coordination with that many to assure that the children and families are getting the services that they need? It's a point of the board should be able, the County Board of Commissioners should be able to determine which LCO that they are in. And they shouldn't have to be divided up into a possible 16 or more local coordinating organizations. Ask for an aye vote.
The motion is the adoption of Amendment 85. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The noes have it, and 85 is lost. Seeing no further discussion, Senator Kirkmeyer.
Funny, funny, funny. You put him up there for a reason. I'm going to do
There is an amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read Amendment 90?
Amendment L090.
Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move L090, L090.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This simply removes, and it starts on page 187 of the bill, and it removes performance contracts. And as I talked about this in committee, and we agreed that at the time we didn't have enough information, so we would come back and look at it on the floor. Removing the performance contract section is this. What it does is in the performance contract section, this was pulled out of essentially the Colorado Works statutes, where there is a performance contract that is required because there are work participation rates that have to be met. Those are federal requirements that were devolved down to counties through the state, where a county or the state, actually the state could be sanctioned and penalized if work participation rates were not met. And in fact, over the years, work participation rates have not been met. So there was a requirement for a performance contract to ensure that counties were working with the state, but also to ensure that the state could not automatically sanction counties. And so there's this whole memorandum of understanding that's worked out. But again, this section of law deals specifically with the Colorado Works program. It doesn't have to do with the CCAP program. So I'm asking to have it delete it or amended out of the bill. And I ask for an aye vote on L090.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion is not a motion. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We urge a no vote on this. I think this is something that we discussed in committee. We did not come to resolution on it. I think there is a real question on if we should take out the piece around penalties. That may not need to be in statute anymore. I don't think it's appropriate, though, to entirely strip performance contracts, though. I think there are some federal requirements that this may conflict with if we were to do so. So I think it's something we can discuss maybe for third reading if we really have to take it out, the penalties piece. I don't think it's critical, though. I think it's fine if we leave it in there. If it's irrelevant, then it's irrelevant, and we can clean that up at a later date. But I don't think it does harm, but I think it would potentially do harm if we took out the performance contracts altogether.
Senator Zinzinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is another conversation that was started in the Education Committee. I was waiting for some feedback about a resolution about whether or not they were required or not. I'm hearing that it would be important to still maintain the performance contracts, but that it would not be necessary to continue with the penalties. So I'll have to say no to the amendment, but I would hope that we would make that change if the penalties pieces is not required, which is what we were sort of discussing in the Education Committee, then I would encourage us to address that. But for now, I'll have to ask for a no vote.
Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you. Again, I would renew my ask for an aye vote on L090. Again, this section of law was pulled out of the Colorado Works, where there is work participation rates. There is a performance that has to be met. With regard to the CCAP program, which is what this is speaking to in the law right now, or in the bill right now, there is no performance area. They couldn't define one the night of the committee, and they still have not defined one. There isn't a work participation rate associated with CCAP. CCAP is basically done by eligibility. They're either at the federal poverty level, 185% up to 225%, or we're not. That is not a performance. That's not a work participation rate. So again, I would renew my ask to in support of 090.
Motion is the adoption of Amendment 90. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. No. The noes have it, and 90 is lost. There is Senator. There's a member of the desk. Will the clerk please read amendment number 80?
Amendment L080 by Senator Kirkmeyer and amend Ring-Gross Bill.
Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move L080.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. L080 basically speaks to getting us back to how CCAP is, Child Care Assistance Program, is run today. In the bill on page 180, starting on page 180, we have where we are changing daily provider reimbursement rates. And I know in committee it was spoke to this, and they spoke to this and talked about how we're trying to get to how they do it in the private sector. So in the private sector, the way that child care provision is happening and what goes on is essentially parents pay for a slot. They pay for the entire month. So whether or not the child goes to the child care provider and attends, the provider gets paid. In CCAP, it's based on the number of days. So if a child attends, they get paid, the provider would get paid per the day. If the parent doesn't take the child to the provider for child care, or preschool, I guess in this case, they would not get paid for it. Currently, right now, the CCAP program is a $135 million program. $90 million of that is provided through federal funds. $45 million comes from the state, and $15 million comes from, I think I did that wrong, $30 million comes from the state, and $15 million comes from counties who are required to pay a maintenance of effort requirement. It funds about 10% of the eligible children for childcare. We're not getting to the full rate for childcare. So in essence, what this does in the bill is by removing the daily rate, it essentially incentivizes providers to encourage attendance, is what they're trying to say. But the opposite is true, because what you end up paying for is what you incentivize. So by paying a monthly rate instead of a daily rate, whether or not a child actually attends or not, we're incentivizing providers to not provide care because they are being paid whether they provide care or not. This is the most financially significant portion of the bill. It would, if implemented without initiating waitlists, double or more the total cost of the services in the program. In actual practice, as I mentioned earlier, counties will be forced to implement waitlists, which means that the 9 to 11% of the financially eligible population that currently is receiving these services will in all likelihood be reduced to somewhere around 5 to 6% of that population. The goal of the bill of the sponsors is to reduce the number of people. Is that the goal of the bill of the sponsors, to reduce the number of people who can benefit from the program? I don't believe it is. Because if this stays in, that's exactly what would happen. The language in the bill would accomplish a reduction in the number of children being able to be served because we're going from a daily rate to a monthly rate. I ask for an aye vote.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I urge a no vote. This was an intentional change, and the goal is to actually make the system better for providers. This is something that we know the status quo has not worked. It's actually been part of what's led to disruptions in workforce and not being able to plan for the long term if they have to plan on a daily rate. So this was an intentional thing. This came out of the stakeholder work that we want to move away from this approach. And there was an amendment adopted in the Education Committee that requires a fiscal analysis before any change to the payment policies occurs. So this is not something that is just going to happen overnight. It will be analyzed, it will be stakeholdered, it will be part of a fiscal impact process, and I think it will be done intentionally with voices at the table. So this is something we want to move away from and implement a process to figure out where we end that is best for the workforce and for providers. And so I urge a no vote on this amendment.
Senator Zinzinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would also like to urge a no vote on this amendment. I think there is an unintended consequence to this in that it actually drives low teacher pay. And I think that is something that this body has demonstrated many times over that we want to encourage. So, and I also think that it impacts our ability to have providers, quite frankly. So I would ask for a no vote.
The motion is the passage of Amendment 80. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The noes have it. Amendment 80 is lost. There's an amendment at the desk. Would the clerk please read Amendment 89?
Amendment L089.
Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move L089.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, members, so back to the procurement code issue. On page 37 of this bill, it says in selecting local coordinating organizations that there isn't a requirement for the state to be subject to the requirements of the procurement code. Now, here's probably going to be a shocker, because for the most part, the entities that may submit applications to be a local coordinating organization are public entities. They are counties, municipal government agencies, school districts, boards of cooperative services, early childhood councils, family resource centers, special taxing districts, Head Starts. It's this one, and then it also includes charter schools, charter school networks and collaboratives, and other public institutions. But there's still one in here that speaks to local nonprofit organizations. which is not necessarily a public organization and could present a conflict, especially if that local nonprofit organization is a preschool provider. So this amendment eliminates the conflict that occurs with not requiring procurement should a local nonprofit organization come forward with an application to be the local coordinating organization. I want you to understand that a local coordinating organization basically has authority over the funding decisions, what occurs in the area, what occurs within the organization proposed boundaries. They're also supposed to go out and recruit other providers. So it would be a bit of a conflict if a provider, a preschool provider, was able to be a local coordinating organization. So this amendment says, and it starts right after institutions on page 37, line 7, says, except that a family child care home or a child care center that is a preschool provider, that they cannot be a local coordinating organization. I think actually it would kind of defeat the purpose of having a local coordinating organization if it's a preschool provider who has control over how the funds are dispersed, and you're going to ask a preschool provider to go out and ask them to recruit other providers in the area. In other words, basically go out and recruit people who are their competition. So I ask for an aye vote on L089.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I urge a no vote on this amendment. I get and appreciate where the senator from Weld County is trying to go with this. There was some language added into the bill that addresses potential conflicts of interest and how to navigate that. Generally speaking, the situation that was laid out shouldn't probably happen. We don't want there to be conflicts. But in practice, we need to provide flexibility because we don't know who's going to apply to be an LCO in every community. We may have communities where only one entity does apply because they're the only one that is capable of doing it, and maybe everybody agrees they should be the one to be the LCO. We don't want to put in statute that they would be ineligible before we even know all the details on the ground. This is something that I think we need to provide flexibility to the Rules Advisory Committee, to the executive director, and to the organizations and communities on the ground to figure out. And if there are problems, I think this is exactly the type of thing that will be discussed in an evaluation and will come to light, and we will address it based on the real experiences that we've seen throughout the communities. So I think it would be premature and potentially harm some communities depending on the situations on the ground. There may be an LCO that does provide services, but there's a very agreed upon MOU ahead of time to be part of the conditions to allow that entity to be an LCO, and everybody agrees with it. If everyone agrees and there's consensus in the community that they should be the LCO, I don't think we should arbitrarily put in statute ahead of time that they are ineligible and not allowed. So I do urge a no vote on this.
Motion is the passage of Amendment 89. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. No. Those have it. 89 is lost. Seeing no further discussion, the motion, Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First and most importantly, we know the differences that kids show up with to kindergarten, to first grade, stay with them the entire rest of their lives. We know that the most impactful dollar that can be spent on a child's education is spent early in that child's education. This bill will transform the lives of kids across this state, and I want to make sure we don't lose that in the very productive discussions that we've had about governance, about the role of counties, about how to make sure that we stand this new department up in the most effective way possible. But we are standing up this new department because this department will change lives. This department will help to level the playing field. We know education is the great equalizer. Education is supposed to be what allows every child to grow up and achieve the American dream. And we're not perfect. We don't create a perfectly level playing field at the end of this. But universal pre-K is a massive step in that direction. This is one of the most important bills that I have had the honor of voting on in my time in the legislature. I want to thank the sponsors for their work on it. I want to thank the folks that have engaged in this very productive discussion today. I want to thank all the advocates out on the other side of the glass who have worked so hard to make this happen. The governor, the voters who passed EE. There's so many people that came together to make this happen. And I had an amendment here to thank one person in particular who has poured her heart and soul into this bill. She heard about it, though, and in her very polite way insisted that I not actually run the amendment. But I do want to just let everyone know what this says. This would rename the short title of this to the Anna Jo Garcia Haynes Early Childhood Act as drafted by Julie Pellegrin.
So moved. All those in favor? I'm just.
I would love to move that. Julie's humility, Julie's talent, Julie's dedication to the young people in this state can be felt in just about everything we do here in the legislature on education. To say there is no greater advocate for kids in this building, I think would be accurate. Now, of course, being on legislative staff, Julie is not allowed to have opinions of her own about what the best legislation would be. But those of us who have worked with her know that she helps make our ideas better. She helps ensure that the ideas we have come across on the page accurately. And if you look at these 525 pages setting up an entirely new department, in many ways it reads like poetry. You can see that she has dedicated time and attention to every detail in this bill. And I just wanted to say thank you so much to Julie Pellegrin for this bill.
Did you move it?
I did not move it. She begged me not beg is maybe too strong.
Leave it on the podium.
Senator Lundeen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And in order to make this a clarion moment of bipartisanship, I step into the well and echo with precision exactly the comments made by my colleague. And I will extend, because that is my nature. We each do our job. And there are days when we find our better pathways forward, when we do our job better. And I would also love to see this act named the Anna Jo Garcia Haynes Early Childhood Act as drafted by Julie Pellegrin, and then I would insert, comma, Esquire, because I am my best legislator when I am working with someone of the talent of Julie Pellegrin. I have enjoyed every moment of the work I've had with her, and we will have, I'm sure, a moment to lionize and speak honorifically of Ms. Pellegrin later in the session, I hope. But when the whip from the Democrat Party came to the whip from the Republican Party and said, hey, I think we ought to do this, I said, she will not let you do that, but boy, we should do that. So, Drafter Pellegrin, thank you so much for all that you do for all of us. And I guess there's no official motion, so I will just step away from the podium for a moment.
Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in support of House Bill 1295. You know, COVID laid bare a lot of crisis, a lot of structural inequity that had existed in our communities and across our state and our nation for a real long time. But it finally made visible what so many of us had felt deep in our bones and lived through for so many years. I was talking to women in my district when we were all in lockdown who were at their wits' end, who suddenly found themselves in a situation where we were being asked to stay at home, but also to just continue on as normal. in our work lives. And childcare and access to affordable, accessible preschool just became untenable, inaccessible. Somehow, because of the pandemic, childcare became less available and more expensive. Not only did that have an immediate impact on the families in my district and across this state, for the childcare operators themselves, who oftentimes those are women-owned businesses. Those childcare operators found themselves unable to proceed. We saw 10% of those childcares shut down, and even higher percentages for childcare operators that were owned by people of color. That structural inequity is part of what we're seeking to address through this bill. When we hear from those childcare operators, from those preschool providers, that one out of four is at risk of closing their doors if we don't do something, this is our opportunity as a legislature to react and to say, you know what? Help is on the way. I heard from, in the months since those really difficult days of lockdown, I've heard from women in my district who said, you know what, I was pregnant during lockdown, and I guess I should have been looking for early childhood options then during the 3rd trimester of my pregnancy, and I thought to myself, that's ludicrous. Certainly, I don't think I'm going to be planning for my kiddo to go into childcare or to early education until maybe they're 2 years old. And yet when they look at the wait lists upon birth of their babies, they're saying, you know what? Oh man, maybe I made a mistake. Maybe I should have gotten on a wait list earlier. That, colleagues, is why this bill matters. Because you shouldn't have to go onto a wait list to try to access early childhood education during your 3rd trimester of pregnancy. We have seen the importance of being able to access early childhood. We've seen what it means for young children's lives. We have seen what it means for to be able to address and meaningfully close the achievement gaps that so often persists. You see that education gap in college graduation rates, in high school graduation rates, in middle school progress. You see it and it begins at the very, very beginnings. And so I'm so grateful to the sponsors for all of their work, and to particularly the good senator from Arapahoe County for your leadership on this issue over the course of many years, but also from the interim committee that really developed and crafted the recommendations that we see here in this beast of a bill. I want to thank Ms. Anna Jo Haynes. Thank you for all of your leadership and for being a guidance, for being a beacon for so many women, for so many leaders, for so many educators. Thank you for your work, because your guidance is also reflected in this policy. Colleagues, this is one of the most concrete ways that we have to advance structural equity as we continue to rebound from the impacts of the pandemic. We heard a lot of debate on this bill. We've considered a number of amendments that were largely around governance and adult issues, right? About how we're going to stand this program up and how we're going to govern this program. But I think that we all stand here today united around this idea that we need to do more as a state when it comes to advancing educational opportunity and equity for our young people. And for me, that has been at the core of evaluating this policy, and I couldn't be prouder of the work that has been done. I ask for an aye vote on House Bill 1295. Thank you.
Senator Lundeen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think it was Oscar Wilde that said, "Brevity is the soul of wit." I shall try and follow in his path. 2 points on this ponderous, massive bill. 525 pages, creating a new Department of State Government. The first point is this. Since 1997, state government in Colorado has grown from 7.9% of the gross state product to last budget cycle, 14.4% of the state gross product. Government continues to grow and grow and grow dramatically. That's since 1997. Since 2019, we have added 14 offices of government: the Office of Public Guardianship, Office of Colorado Resiliency, Office of New Americans, Office of Agricultural Drought and Climate Resilience, Office of Saving People Money on Health Care, Office of Insurance Ombudsman, Office of Colorado Broadband, Office of Just Transitions, Office of Gun Violence Prevention, Office of Financial Empowerment, Freight Mobility and Safety Branch of the Transportation Development Division, Outdoor Recreation Industry Office, and the Office of Future Work, as well as the Colorado Equity Office. 42 FTE, and a little over $4 million associated with the creation of all those offices. This creates a new department, a massive department. Friends, colleagues, beware. Government is growing and growing fast in Colorado. There is a debate to be had whether that's economically beneficial to the state or economically detrimental to the state. The second point is this. This bill seeks to bring together, from many one, e pluribus unum, a diverse set of providers. It's called mixed delivery. The provision of care for children comes from many different methods, many different perspectives, many different worldviews, many different secular, religious, and faith-based organizations. This will consolidate that all into one office. To the extent we protect and provide for the ongoing permanent provision of a disparate versions and very, very different perspectives and methods of delivery, as long as we protect that mixed delivery, I think there is hope, there is benefit. In fact, this particular provision of service to children before they enter into the K-12 environment might hopefully positively contaminate over time the K-12 environment and move us towards a circumstance where we have multiple providers of services in the K-12 environment. Right now, K-12 is turning in a 50-50 result at best. 50% of the students, 3rd grade, 5th grade, 7th grade, are below proficient. 50% of the students are below proficient reading, math, and writing. In fact, in some circumstances, more recent studies, 80 and 90% failure rates among black and brown children in some of the urban areas. There is an element of this bill, but it's not the bill itself. It's what the bill seeks to pull together and make perhaps more efficient. This mixed delivery, this method of providing services from many different providers instead of one governmental provider, and the hope that that brings. I will be a no vote on this bill, but there are aspects of it that I think are beneficial. There are aspects of it that I think may give us a pathway forward to improve as well our K-12 education system. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for governing this debate so well. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I've spent a lot of time, a lot of part of my career advocating on behalf of families in need, advocating for those families who struggle for affordable, quality childcare, advocating for those children that find themselves in a child welfare system, advocating for families, for self-sufficiency, so that they have economic security. Spent a lot of time doing that over the course of the last 30 years. So I think the statement that we all care about children and that we care about that they have affordable health care is a valid statement. Don't disagree. Child care, thank you. That they have affordable child care and that they have the chance at an education, an early education through preschool and kindergarten. I think that's a valid statement. Here's my problems with this bill. When Proposition EE was passed, there were funds for a long list of programs for the first 3 years. And that included that it was supposed to fund at least 10 hours per week of preschool for every child in their final year before kindergarten. 10 hours. Not full day. Somehow we took that 10 hours and morphed it into setting out a process for a new department and creating a new entitlement program that will morph entitlement programs like the Colorado Works, the TANF program, and the Child Welfare Services programs, and even the current Child Care Assistance Program. In fact, you could take the cost combined of all three of those programs, and it will probably end up less than where we're headed to with this bill and with this new department in creating a new entitlement program. For preschool, again, a very laudable goal. I find it ironic that just last week we were arguing and debating, I shouldn't say arguing, we were debating over funding what is a constitutional obligation that we have to fund education, to fund the budget stabilization factor. In fact, I think it was mentioned someplace, I read it in the paper, that we weren't going to introduce bills that would just be a letter to Santa Claus. Apparently, we're going to introduce bills that will be an early Christmas gift to the governor at whatever cost. They talked about in committee, and all the committees I was in that I heard about this, and I read it through the transition plan, or lack thereof, that this would not further silo programs in the state of Colorado. That we were going to bring all these programs together. But you know, we did that in 1996 and 1997 when there were major changes that took place and we created the Colorado Works program. And we also made changes within the Child Welfare Services programs. We devolved those to counties. And we created a department that was supposed to bring together all of the self-sufficiency programs to create economic security and give our families and kids the best shot that they had, again, to economic security. Where we combined in a system called the Combined Benefits Management System, the whole process of application and applying for, making sure kind of that we had that one-stop shop, that gatekeeper, where if a family showed up at a county Department of Human Services requesting to get the services for the SNAP program, the food stamps program, that the county department was required to go through and make sure and see if they were eligible for TANF, for Medicaid, for employment programs, for child care. That if a family found themselves or a child found themselves in the Child Welfare Services program, that the single parent was advised of whether or not they were eligible for SNAP, for TANF, for Medicaid, for employment programs, so that they could get economic security, so that that child, that family would have the opportunity for prosperity. What we're now doing is taking a tool out of the toolbox. We're taking a tool away from the self-sufficiency programs. It's called the child care programs, which are integral. They're integral to self-sufficiency. They're integral to the TANF program. One of the greatest barriers to employment is child care. We're moving that program over to a new department. And what I hope that you all realize, as I was talking earlier, the current funding available for childcare, for the child care assistance programs, serves about 10% of the eligible population. Yet we're going to move that program over after pretty limited discussion. The counties have said they don't know where the analysis came from. When asked, where's their analysis? How are we going to move this over? How are we going to ensure that we're not providing for yet another silo just over in a different department? We didn't get a response. When 1304, House Bill 1304 required that there be plans in place, a transition plan that required fiscal structure that determined and basically wrote out and enumerated out a provision of services and programs that included administration and operational infrastructure. We've never yet to receive that plan. That plan was supposed to be received by December 1st. Essentially, we don't have a business plan. We're flying by the seat of our pants to create one of the largest entitlement programs that will be funded by the state. And we heard about this in the interim committee on early childhood and school readiness. We heard about the anticipated workforce shortage and the number of teachers that will be required to carry out preschool for every 4-year-old in this state. And it was like close to $1 billion. We know the CCAP program only funds 10%. We need another $1 billion to be able to fund childcare for every 4-year-old in this state. It's a laudable goal. It's a huge entitlement program that we're starting, and we don't even fund education fully, which is our constitutional obligation. There was no timeline in the transition plan for a transition of activities, which would have been a good idea. We could have taken the time to transition those early childhood programs to ensure that fragmentation doesn't occur, to ensure that alignment does occur. But we didn't do that. We just got to rush the bill through. We just got to rush this through, because by 2023, we got to provide 10 hours per week of preschool for every child in their final year before kindergarten. We didn't have to create a new department to fulfill the obligation that was voted on and passed in Proposition EE, but that's what we chose to do. And so now, one of the reasons why I was fighting for a board and why it needed to have county involvement is because the CCAP program, unlike this new department, is for children beyond the age of 5. It's for children all the way up through 13. But now we're moving it over to a new department that serves up to 5-year-olds. And I can appreciate that during COVID, we had child care facilities that closed. I know personally that counties in every corner of this state, throughout the Front Range, on the Western Slope, wherever, worked using their ARPA funds and their CCAP funds and their TANF funds to work with those child care providers to ensure that they could keep their doors open. That was happening. It's not like counties didn't recognize the problems that were being caused by child care providers closing their door. But if this truly was and truly is still a huge funding issue, then I ask you, why did we roll forward all of the child care dollars that came from the feds? All those additional child care dollars. Why did we roll those forward? Why aren't we providing that funding now? This bill, again, just creates a new state entitlement program that we can't fund. We're going to raise expectations. We are going to create other silos. We're going to fragment a program that counties and the state have worked on since 1998 to bring together to provide for economic security for our families. And we're going to fragment that. And there is no, when I asked several times, there's no provision for how we are going to ensure that those children that are above the age of 5 are going to be able to receive the child care funding and services that they so desperately need. I would ask for a no vote on this bill. Thank you.
Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I rise in strong support for House Bill 1295. If I could walk back there to see my queen, I would. And I am going to attempt to do that after we're done. But there's some people that deserve to be recognized, because when you know Anna Jo, you know that babies are going to be at the center of the table. And you can always tell a person by what they talk about. And she is a true champion for kids, way before it was popular. So when I look at this bill, it's a bill that is the right policy for the right time. Because what it intends to do, it intends to integrate all of the services and the programs to make sure that we are doing the right things for our children. It's the right approach. You've heard some of the senators talk about all the FTEs that were created, all of the different departments that were created. All that's good work. But we're here discussing this bill and the work it intends to do, and that's House Bill 1295. And what I know about my icon is that she always keeps a focus on marginalized children. And when I look at the community that I represent, I have some kids in my district, you might have some in yours, that this year was the first time that they had a chance to be in the classroom to have face-to-face instruction with a teacher, because they were out for kindergarten and they were out for first grade. If ever we needed to have an emphasis on kids after what we've gone through because of COVID-19, it's now, because our kids cannot wait. So as I look at this bill, and it sounds like there's been a lot of discussion about it already, I'm just here to let you all know that I am in strong support of this bill, and I hope that you join me in voting aye on this House Bill 1295.
Senator Story.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too rise in support of this bill. I know it's been a long, long time coming, and it's been in the works for years. Lots and lots of effort and time and stakeholdering and meetings and collaboration has gone on to pull this all together. And it is a work in progress. It's not done and probably won't be done for a while. But I look forward to it being implemented to ensure that kids across Colorado do receive some early childhood education. Our 4-year-olds in particular, it'll be great when all of them have the opportunity for access for affordable 4-year-old early childhood education. That may also take a little while to happen. I wish that Colorado was flush with money, funding, and could fully implement a program that is worthy of what our students need across the state. And I look forward to that happening as well, and reaching down to the 3-year-olds in time. But we do have a funding problem in Colorado in so many ways. It's not just negatively impacting early childhood education, but also K-12, also higher ed, also transportation, roads, bridges, transit options, clean air, mental health services, senior services, all the things that we do in Colorado and wish to invest in. We struggle to find the funding that's really necessary. And that's another issue for another day. But I appreciate that we are moving forward with the early childhood. Like I said, it's been a long time coming, and I appreciate the amendments that have come forward to make this a better bill. And I think we need to be focused and emphatic and dedicated to looking at this in 2 years and looking at the governance model and a governing board to ensure that going forward we have the best voices at the table to help guide and direct a new agency the size of this one that is as important as this one is. So thank you very much, colleagues, and I look forward to passing this bill.
Senator Buckner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have been waiting for this day for a long time. You know my background: early childhood, language development. And when I used to screen children when they would come into the schools, I saw the difference between those kids who had advantages and those kids who did not have advantages. When I was screening those kids, there was so much difference in the low-income kids and the kids of privilege. This is my passion. In my Senate district and in all the state of Colorado, I have been working on this bill for over a year. I was chair of the Early Childhood School Readiness Commission. Did things go smoothly? Fairly. Did we miss some steps? Yes. But this is a huge lift, and we're doing it, and we're delivering on the promise that we stated to the parents of Colorado. This new agency is going to make a huge difference. It's not going to be as fragmented as the current agency. I have parents who tell me that they have missed out. They have left services on the table because of going from agency to agency to agency. With this new Department of Early Childhood, it's going to be a one-stop shop. Parents can go to one place to find out what they are eligible for and not leave services on the table like they've left them on the table before. Providers have told me that they have left out, they have been left out as well, because they haven't been able to take care of all the advantages that they have had as well as providers. So this is going to make for a more fair system for everyone. If you're a parent who is low income, may not be as confident as those of us with more education, it's intimidating to go to some of these agencies. Some of my parents are telling me that their language barrier came between them and being able to get as many services as they deserved. With one-stop shopping, with this new agency, we're going to make it easier for these parents and for the providers. That's what this is all about. Families and children, giving everyone the best start they can get so they can lead a more productive life, and making our families proud, helping out those working parents. So I want to thank everyone who has been instrumental in passing this bill. I also want to thank Senator Kirkmeyer, because she knows a lot about this business. And we've had some vigorous conversations, and I just want to thank you for always keeping me on my toes. Sometimes this hasn't been smooth, but like I said, I think challenging each other makes us better. And I just want to thank everyone in the Senate who has shown enough interest in this bill to learn as much as you could. Thank you. So with that, I'm asking for an aye vote on this historic bill that I am so proud to be a co-sponsor with the President of the Senate.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I couldn't have said it better. Urge and I vote. I want to thank everyone for the debate along the way and everybody who has worked on this policy and this program up until now. We're going to get this right. We have to. And I hope we all, one way or another, stay engaged as the stakeholder work continues, as the advisory committee gets put together, and as we start delivering these key services. Because we're going to keep talking about it in a couple of years, especially because of an amendment we offered today. So let's all stay engaged, do everything we can to ensure that this program is the best it possibly can be, so that we're doing the best for Colorado families, for kids, and for the providers that take care of them every day. So thank you, and I urge and I vote.
The motion is the adoption of House Bill 1295. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and 1295 is adopted. Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
The motion for the committee is a rise and report. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, the committee will rise and report.
The Senate will come to order. Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has met and had a number of bills in consideration. Will the clerk please read the report?
Mr. President, your committee of the whole begs leave to report it has had under consideration the following attached bills, being the second reading thereof, and makes the following recommendations thereon. Senate Bill 146 is amended, passed on second reading, and ordered, engrossed, and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. House Bills 1025 and 1295 is amended, passed on second reading, and ordered, revised, and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 176 laid over until 4/13/2022 and retaining its place on the calendar. House Bill 1294 referred to the Committee on Appropriations.
Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of the report.
The motion is the adoption of the Committee of the Whole report. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, the Committee of the Whole report is adopted. Senate Bill 146 is amended, passed on second reading, order engrossed, and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. House Bill 1025, House Bill 1295 as amended, passed on second reading, order revised, and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 176 laid over until April 13th, 2022, and retained its place on the calendar. House Bill 1294 referred to the Committee on Appropriations. Will the clerk please mark Senator Scott as excused? Committee reports.
April 12, 2022, the Committee on Appropriations, after consideration on the merits of the committee, recommends the following. House Bill 1213 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation, and with the recommendation that it be placed on the consent calendar. Senate Bill 160 be amended as follows, and as so amended, be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation. Senate Bill 166 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation, and with the recommendation to be placed on the consent calendar. Senate Bill 175 be amended as follows, and as so amended, be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation. Senate Bill 180 be amended as follows, as so amended, be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation. Senate Bill 183 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation, with the recommendation that be placed on the consent calendar. Senate Bill 188 be amended as follows, and as so amended, be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation, with the recommendation that it be placed on the consent calendar. Senate Bill 193 be amended as follows, and as so amended, be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation. Senate Bill 194 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate take up the following bills on special orders consent. House Bill 1213, Senate Bill 166, Senate Bill 183, and Senate Bill 188 at the hour of 12:04 p.m.
The motion is that the Senate take up House Bill 1213, Senate Bill 166, Senate Bill 183, and Senate Bill 188 on special orders consent at the hour of 12:04 p.m. This does require a 2/3 majority. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. That motion is adopted. The Senate will take up House Bill 1213, Senate Bills 166, 183, and 188 on special orders consent at the hour of 12:04 p.m. Special orders, second reading of bills, consent calendar. Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve itself in the Committee of the Whole for consideration of special orders, second reading of bills, consent calendar.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The motion is adopted and the Senate will resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for the consideration of the special orders, second reading of bills, consent calendar, and Senator Coleman will take the chair.
Committee will come to order, and the cold rule is still relaxed up in here. Would the clerk please read the title of all the bills in the special order, second reading of bills, consent calendar?
House Bill 1213, Representatives Young and Pico, Senator Buckner, concerning the continuation of the regulation of speech-language pathologists by the Director of the Division of Professions and Occupations in the Department of Regulatory Agencies and in connection therewith implementing the recommendations in the Department's Sunset Review. Senate Bill 166, Senator Donovan, Representatives McCormick and Will, concerning the permanent extension of the period of time that the Colorado Non-Game Conservation and Wildlife Restoration Cash Fund Voluntary Contribution Checkoff Program will appear on the state individual tax return form. Senate Bill 183, Senators Winter and Gardner, Representatives Duran and Weisman, concerning programs that provide services to crime victims. Senate Bill 188, Senators Fields and Quorum, Representatives Robertson Titone, concerning behavioral health support for advocates in the criminal justice system.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move for the passage of all the bills on the second reading of, on special orders, second reading of bills consent calendar, which includes House Bill 1213, Senate Bill 166, Senate Bill 183 and the Associated Judiciary Committee report, and Senate Bill 188 and the Associated Judiciary and Appropriations Committee reports.
Is there any discussion on any of the committee reports? The motion for the body is the adoption of all the committee reports on special orders, second reading of bills, consent calendar. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the committee reports are adopted. Is there any discussion on any of the bills on the consent calendar? The motion for the body is the adoption of all the bills on the special orders, second reading of bills, consent calendar. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bills are adopted. Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
Motion for the committee is to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. The committee will rise and report. No. 90% of it.
The Senate will come to order. Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has had a number of bills under consideration. Will the clerk please read the report?
Mr. President, your Committee of the Whole begs leave to report it has had under consideration the following attached bills, being the second reading thereof, and makes the following recommendations thereon. Senate Bill 166, Senate Bill 183 is amended, Senate Bill 188 is amended, passed on second reading and ordered engrossed and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. House Bill 1213, passed on second reading and ordered revised and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage.
Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the report.
Motion is the adoption of the Committee of the Whole report. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 34 ayes, 0 no, 0 absent, 1 excused, the Committee of the Whole report is adopted. Senate Bill 166, Senate Bill 183 is amended, Senate Bill 188 as amended, passed on second reading and ordered engrossed and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. House Bill 1213 passed on second reading and order revised and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Consideration of resolutions. Will the clerk please read the title to Senate Joint Resolution 10? Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to lay over Senate Joint Resolution 10 to Friday, April 22nd, and Senate Joint Resolution 12 to Thursday, April 21st.
The motion is to lay over Senate Joint Resolution 10 until April 22nd and Senate Joint Resolution 12 to April 21st. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and those resolutions will be laid over. Consideration of memorials. Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to lay over Senate Memorial 2 to Friday, April 22nd.
The motion is to lay over Senate Memorial 2 until Friday, April 22nd. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and Senate Memorial 2 will be laid over. Consideration of House amendments to Senate bills. Will the clerk read the title to Senate Bill 34?
Senate Bill 34, Senator Colcor and Priola, Senate Representatives Byrd and Sandridge, concerning measures to counteract the filing of fraudulent business documents with the Secretary of State.
Senator Colcor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate reject the House amendments to Senate Bill 34, that a conference committee be appointed.
Is there any discussion? The motion is that the Senate not concur with the House amendments to Senate Bill 34 and that a conference committee be appointed so that we can get our way. Are there any no votes? Didn't think so. I don't even know what that bill's about, but I am passionate about making sure we stick to our guns on this. With a vote of 34 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, the motion is adopted. We will decide at a later date on. Senator Colcor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Conference Committee on SB 34 be given permission to go beyond the scope of the differences between the two houses.
The motion before the body is to grant permission to the conferees on the first conference committee on Senate Bill 34 to go beyond the scope of the differences between the two houses. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and permission is granted. Will the clerk please read the title to Senate Bill 100?
Senate Bill 100, Senator Winter and Gardner, Representative Duran and Escar, concerning changes to the Domestic Violence Fatality Review Board statutes and in connection therewith making and reducing appropriations.
Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate concur with the House amendments to SB 100.
Senator Winter, please explain yourself.
The House made sure that the funding was flexible to reach all of those entities that need to benefit from this bill, and I encourage a yes vote.
Is there any further discussion? The motion is that the Senate concur with House amendments to Senate Bill 100. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 34 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, the motion is adopted. Senator Winter for repassage.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for final passage of Senate Bill 100.
The motion is the repassage of Senate Bill 100. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 34 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, Senate Bill 100 is repassed. Co-sponsors. Cool. Will the clerk please read the title of Senate Bill 116?
Senate Bill 116, Senators Holbert and Pedersen, Representative Van Winkle and Byrd, concerning the ability of an individual to obtain an occupational credential through the Occupational Credential Portability Program.
Minority Leader Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. President. As much as it grieves me to say so, I move that the Senate concur with House amendments to Senate Bill 116.
Please explain why we would do such a thing, Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, if you want to, members of you want to refer to the revised version or re-revised version of the bill, page 4, you might recognize the opportunity that anyone has to go sit down with the engineers, surveyors, and architects and discuss why they should not be exempt from this bill. They were successful in passing an amendment in the House to exempt them from this bill. And again, if you disagree with my motion and want to reject House amendments, then I invite you to go sit down and have many, many conversations with the engineers, surveyors, and architects who don't want to be part of it. I think it unlikely that anyone wants to invest that time in the next 29 days, so therefore I renew my motion to concur with House amendments to Senate Bill 116.
Is there any discussion? The motion is that the Senate concur with House amendments to Senate Bill 116. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 34 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, the motion is adopted. Minority Leader Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move for repassage of Senate Bill 116.
The motion is the repassage of Senate Bill 116. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 34 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, Senate Bill 116 is repassed. Co-sponsors. Message from the House.
April 12, 2022, the House has passed on third reading and transmitted to the reviser of statutes House Bill 1155, 1278, and 1324, amended as printed in House Journal April 11, 2022. The House has passed on third reading and transmitted to the reviser of statutes House Bill 1312. The House has passed on third reading and transmitted to the reviser of statutes Senate Bill 10, amended as printed in House Journal April 11, 2022.
Message from the reviser.
We herewith transmit without comment House Bill 1312, without comment as amended House Bill 1155 and 1324, without comment as amended Senate Bill 10.
Announcements. Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, we're going to mess with ag. On Thursday, Senate Agricultural Natural Resources is canceled. So we will move the appointments to a later date, as well as Senate Bill 29. And then Senate Bill 168, Backcountry Search and Rescue, will be moved to tomorrow's Senate Agricultural Committee to be second on the list, and that is upon adjournment. So ag is canceled on Thursday.
Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, Senate State Veteran Military Affairs Committee will be meeting today upon, not upon adjournment, Lord goodness, at 2 o'clock at the old Supreme Court chambers to hear 3 bills, House Bill 1307, 1297, and Senate Bill 174.
Senator Janal.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senate Local Government Committee will meet at 2 o'clock today. We are hearing one bill, and that is 1225, the President's bill.
Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Transportation and Energy Committee is going to meet today at 2 p.m. and 3:57. We will hear House Bill 1249 and 1253.
Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senate Judiciary Committee meeting on Thursday will start upon adjournment in recognition of Good Friday coming up. We'll be not hearing House Bill 1234 and House Bills 1272. We will be hearing Senate Bills 179, House Bill 1217, and the Senate Bill 196 and new Senate Bill 201. Thank you.
Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. President. My understanding is that we can move afternoon committees on Thursdays to on adjournment. That would be my preference. So let's say that Senate Education on Thursday will meet on adjournment, not at 1:30, and that is final for now.
Senator Smallwood.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request a moment of personal privilege for purposes of delivering a memorial tribute.
Granted.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, don't want to take up a lot of your time, but I do want to take just a minute to remember a good friend of mine passed away right before the pandemic. So my thought was to have his family here to know that we here in the Senate do recognize Coloradans who, at least in my eyes, were not only giants in business, but also people that really gave back to the community, great family people. So with your permission, colleagues, I would like to read this tribute to my friend Sandy Hamilton. The Colorado Senate convened in the second regular session of the 72nd General Assembly hereby honors and remembers the life of Alexander Vincent Hamilton III, who I've never called him that. That's my friend Sandy. Sandy had many roles, vigorous entrepreneur and a caring friend to many. But most important to Sandy was he was really dedicated to his family, his beautiful wife Christine, his 3 children, who again I would have loved to have had here in the Senate. On this request, Senator Jim Smallwood, given the 9th day of March, State Capitol, Denver, Colorado, signed by the then President Leroy M. Garcia, the President of the Senate. So Sandy, rest in peace to his family. Know that we are thinking about you here in Colorado, and it's the very least that we could do to honor Sandy here today. Thank you very much, colleagues.
Further announcements. Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate adjourn until tomorrow, Wednesday, April 13th at 9 a.m.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Senate will adjourn until 9 a.m. Wednesday, April 13th, 2022.